Okay, how you guys doing? My name is Miguel Rodriguez with Kaiser University, and I'm doing my Criminal Justice Integrated Capstone Project. My professor is Justine Madu. And for me, this is going to be the end of it. And for my audience, it's going to be hard to see with the cameras, but we have Kyle, who's a firefighter, John Brooks is a firefighter, Lieutenant Derek George, who's also a fire marshal, law enforcement, and we have Officer Mines, who was also deputy sheriff. Next slide, please. Okay, solitary confinement. I feel it's a much-needed policy for a certain range of criminals. Click the next one. You don't have to go. This kind of just gives a quick overview. Okay, the origins in the United States of the use of solitary confinement. It started in 1929 by the Quakers. It was very religious back then. And back then, the thought was, if they could stick somebody alone in a jail cell with a Bible, the person would read the Bible, get forgiven of their sins, repent, and come out rehabilitated. Pretty much that didn't work out. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, solitary confinement. 1943, the federal government opened up Alcatraz. Alcatraz was built to house the worst of the worst. I mean, there's like household gangsters in there, like Al Capone, Scarface, Machine Gun Kelly, Whitey Bulger, all of them were inmates. Now, the use of solitary confinement idea had changed at this point because they used the hole as a means of punishment. In other words, if you got out of line, they were going to stick you someplace that was so bad that you weren't going to get out of line again. So instead of repentance, the goal was now punishment. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, in Alcatraz, they set up the solitary units that I just spoke about. They used to call it D block. And again, it was for the most unruly of the roommates. And back then, it was pretty harsh because they put you in a room basically naked in the dark, and you're only given bread and water to eat. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, the focus changed in 1983. In an incident called the Marion Incident. It's Marion State Correctional Facility. There were 2 correctional officers killed the same day at different times by members of the Aryan Nation. Okay, now this is where the history changed and they started to realize that the use of solitary confinement is not going to be for more or less to keep people from, you all right? It's going to keep people from communicating with one another, because these guys, the Aryan Nation, they set up a plan in jail, and they set up to kill these 2 correctional officers. And Marriott now adopted the first lockdown, in which prisoners were going to be held in the cells for 23 hours a day. This is bringing it up to modern times. Okay, next folks, please. This is Thomas Silverstein. He was the one that came up with the idea with another member named Clayton Fountain to kill the officers. He changed the way the solitary confinement was used forever, basically. And this case demonstrates the needs of solitary confinement to keep dangerous individuals from communicating and talking and stuff to one another. Next slide. Okay, the Marion Incident was copied by many states, and this is the beginning of what we have called the supermax prisons that we have today. Next slide. Okay, solitary confinement was the way to cut off communication. It became evident that solitary was needed, retention wasn't working, and it did little to curb bad behavior. But however, it was effective at stopping communication. As you're going to see, gangsters and bad guys and terrorists, they started getting more sophisticated as the rules became tighter. Next slide. This is King Blood Felipe. He was a leader of the New York Latin Kings gang. Now this guy was a murderer on the lam from Chicago. Got locked up in prison, but his thing was to send letters to his gang members from his prison cell. To beat on site, terminate on site, whatever he wanted, he would do it all from his jail cell. And they started, and actually what ended up happening was innocent people died as a result. Like he would put a hit or a contract on a rival gangster, and they would go try to do a hit on the gangster, and an innocent person would get killed. I mean, one incident in the Bronx, they actually lit a whole building on fire, The bad guy, the other gangster, got away, and a family was burned to death. Next slide, please. Again, the Felipe case demonstrates the need for solitary confinement to disrupt the contact of dangerous individuals. As I mentioned before, the orders were carried out continuously from prison. After Felipe's sentence in solitary confinement, the murders by his orders were permanently stopped. He can no longer communicate, and that's why people are getting whacked on his orders. Next case. Okay, if King Blood and the Latin Kings weren't bad enough, we have this character named Peter Pistol Pete Rolak. He started the Sex Money Murder Bloods gang in New York City, selling crack, killing people. He's similar to Felipe. He was ordering murders from prison using coded letters. However, he did something else that nobody else has done. Just like in the professional world, you guys put out like circulars and curriculums. You guys communicate, hey, this is a new fire technique, or this is a new technique in the police department. They have articles that go out in jail, and they talk about different things that they do. Well, he started putting the names of people that were cooperating with the police, and some of those people got killed, and/or they had to get put into witness protection, which was never seen before. Next slide, please. Okay, Pistol Pete. They put his picture up in the Bronx. As you can see, former occupation leader, sex, money, murder, now currently in the state penitentiary. Found guilty of murder, found guilty of ordering several murders from his prison cell. 5 innocent people were falsely prosecuted on his orders and to kill an innocent victim. In other words, he put out a hit from jail, which was carried out and botched. And then the police arrested the 5 individuals who were innocent. An innocent person got killed, 5 innocent people went to prison on his orders. Next slide. Okay, Rolak was found guilty of ordering the murders from prison. He was offered a plea deal. He was facing the death penalty. He is the first person to agree to a plea deal of life in solitary confinement. In other words, he took that deal. That it's not like prison. It's not like they were going to stick him in and out through the prison system. But the solitary confinement was a part of the plea deed itself. Next slide, please. Okay, terrorists. We don't have to mention many of them, but their purpose is to hurt, maim, and just kill people. Look what just happened with the Boston bombers. People's legs got ripped off, person died, and the guy, I believe, just got sentenced. He got found guilty a few days ago. Terrorists are known for having great communication, and that's well documented. They communicate, they radicalize people on the internet. They have different social media. They're very good at communicating with one another. So solitary, when you hear them put them in solitary units, it's to prevent communication, and this leads to the organizational breakdown. If you notice, the guys who are doing the murders and the bombings are the underlings. You never see the big top dogs doing, getting blown up themselves. I think getting blown up hurts. Next slide. These are some notable terrorists that are locked up in solitary. Anybody tell me who this guy is?
Which guy?
The first guy, this guy.
That's Frank, isn't it?
No, that's not Frank. That's Ramzi Youssef. He is the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They didn't bring down the building back then, but he was the one that did that. And anybody recognize who that is?
Frank?
That's not Frank either.
Okay.
No, this is
that guy from the World Trade Center?
No, this is Richard Reed. That's the shoe bomber from London.
He does kind of look like Frank.
They kind of look like him. Well, anyway, he tried to get on a plane with some shoe dynamite to blow up a plane, and that didn't work. And now they're held in solitary. Why? Because you can't have guys like this communicating with other people, having them orders and telling them what to do and stuff. Next slide, please. Okay, where are these people out? Like I said, Marion was the first prison to have the 23-hour day lockdown to set up the first supermax-style prison. Separation and isolation are the goal. Several states follow. Now, what this has led to right now is what we call of the Supermax federal prison, such as the one that they just built, not just built, but the one they built in ADX Florence. The first high-tech Supermax prison built specifically for that person. Next slide, please. Okay, I kind of went over this, we'll touch it on again. It was about Yusuf Ramsey and Richard Reed, and I kind of stuck the slides in the wrong part. Maybe one thing to note, all these guys mentioned after Luis Felipe are all locked up in the same jail. And they probably don't even know it because there's no communication or contact against all of them. ADX is where they're sticking the worst of the worst. These guys are on 23-hour-a-day lockdown. They're not allowed to even talk to the prison guards. Next slide. Okay, again, my reasoning for having solitary confinement is to stop communication between organized criminals and organizations, the protection of innocent people and the general public, and to keep order and command for the prison staff and prisoners. Next slide. Okay, a little bit about the cost. On average, is only about $15,000 to $20,000 a year more to house somebody in solitary than the average inmate. So it's not bad considering the cost to risk ratio. I believe it's well worth the money. Okay, next slide. Okay, now these are just my references. You can get in shut it. Does anybody have any questions? Like legit ones? Not like Frank. What?
Where's ADX?
It's in Florence, Colorado. And actually, this is pretty cool because the guards are up top, but the jail cells are underneath they're underneath the ground. So you really even if you try to dig your way out of it, it's going to be a hard time.
What is the current thought process on solitary confinement as it relates to long-term rehabilitation of the criminals?
Well, I'm not saying anything about rehabilitation. My purpose for locking these people up is to keep them separated. The rehabilitation process didn't work with Alcatraz. In other words, they stuck you in there for bad behavior trying to get you to conform, and that didn't work. And it didn't work with the Quakers neither. You know, the Quakers.
The main goal is to prevent that.
The main goal is to prevent these people from speaking to each other or to even see the light of day. Either that or have the death penalty and just get rid of them. Because these guys have been, every single one of these people has been so dangerous that even from being isolated, taken in prison, issued, orders and gotten people killed.
So the 23-hour lockdown, that extra hour that they have, what is that used for? For meals or yard time or?
Well, yeah, they have a yard time, but basically like in ADX, which is kind of funny, they take you out of your jail cell, they walk you to another little kind of jail cell where you can run around or play with a ball or do something.
Could they play with each other?
They probably do.
Are they allowed to meet up with each other?
Not at all.
It's just them by themselves for 1 hour?
They have slightly different levels, but for the most part, they're not even allowed to talk to the prison guards. They get shackled, they walk you to the place, unshackle you, let you run around in the yard, shackle you back up, and put you back in the cell.
So if they're this bad, are they there because they're in a state that doesn't do the death penalty, or why would they not just be?
Well, some jurisdictions have a death penalty, and if so, they get put to death, and some jurisdictions don't. If you're in a state or a case or something that doesn't have a death penalty, then you
or they might plea it down.
Or, yeah, it could be a possibility of a plea deal. Like I said, in that one case with Pistol Pete, Rolac, it was either the death penalty or you can do life, but in solitary. You're not going to do life and have yard time and do none of that.
Is there any way that they can get out of solitary and do enough time to where they get good behavior where they can eventually come out, or once they're in solitary forever and that's that?
Well, there's other people that are in solitary, but that's not the focus of what I was writing about. My focus is on certain individuals that need to be held in for the rest of their lives. Solitary confinement, sure. There's jails that have special housing units, they call SHUs, and they go in there, like you said, for bad behavior, or they want to keep them away from other inmates or for protection. But that's a completely different topic.
you know how much it costs for somebody? I saw that it was 15 to 20,000 more for solitary. How much does it usually run?
So it depends on the state, just like anywhere else, like Florida's cheaper than it is in California.
So your figure of 15 and 20,000, that's per inmate?
Per inmate difference, that's the average difference, depending on the state. You're looking at anywhere from 30 to 70,000
A year?
a year to house these people. I mean, you gotta feed them, you gotta give them medical attention. How much does it cost the prison guards? How much does all the apparatus cost? It's like running a fire department or a police department or a sheriff's office.
Yeah, factor everything in.
That all costs money, so yeah, that all gets factored into it. But like I said, the main focus of this was these people need to be literally like locked up, throw away the key, and that's what's saving lives. Every single one of these individuals were getting people whacked. Well, that's not the right term. They were getting people killed up until the point where they got locked in a room and weren't allowed to communicate with anybody else.
Do many of those people try to do insanity plea or anything?
I'm pretty sure they have. None of these guys that I didn't get into that part of the study of not in this particular argument. All right, guys. I hope you guys can take something away out of this. I put a lot of work into it. Thank you guys for giving me the time to be here.
Yeah.